The Education Collaborative was envisioned by Ashesi University back in 2016 when in thinking about our skills strategy as a university, we asked ourselves, how quickly can we really bring about this African Renaissance if we're just doing it within ourselves at Ashesi University? So in thinking around this goal for transformation, we asked ourselves, could we rather bring along other institutions on the continent who buy into this similar vision, to work together to really rapidly and quickly scale the outcomes for students on the continent. And so in achieving that, we've had to work through the differences in culture, the differences in context, the differences in types of institution, right? So those have really been our biggest challenges. And in tackling that, we've had to take a very organic approach to building the relationships and the connections that we've established in the Education Collaborative. So I would say the university leaders really have been our biggest ally, working through the kinks together, working through how to collaborate more efficiently and effectively, and helping us to determine where to prioritize resources and efforts to ensure the best outcomes. Also, a very notable ally has been the Mastercard Foundation in believing in this vision, in this initiative, and supporting through its resourcing for the next few years. In the last 3 years, we have been rolling out our 10-year strategy, ending in 2030. In doing that, we've really figured out how best to set up a regional hub, because the Education Collaborative is organized or implemented through regional hubs to drive further contextualization and relevance of the solutions and the sharing that happens. And in the last 3 years, one of the biggest successes is setting up these regional hubs. We set up East African Hub with about 10 institutions being the anchors in that region. And then we set up with the West Africa regional hubs with close to 15 higher education institutions really driving priorities in that region. So the future looks like institutions seamlessly working towards one goal for transformative higher education in Africa. And I think that's one of the biggest goals we are working towards in the Education Collaborative, to build a certain culture of trust such that institutions at any point feel like they can rely on each other to learn, to address challenges, and to make progress in giving quality education to the students that come through their systems and structures.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you all for taking the time to join today's meeting. Would love to know where you are joining from, the name of your institution, the name of your countries, and your name. Would like to know you and then also engage with you on the call. You're all welcome to today's speaker session on mixed method research. This is an initiative led by the Education Collaborative in collaboration with the University of Ghana. And this is part of the first session of a 6-series that will be running in the Education Collaborative to enhance the career advancement of faculties and administrators in the Education Collaborative. So you are all welcome once again. I would hand over to Prof. Dateba, our lead from the University of Ghana, to get us started on the session. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Rita, for this opportunity. And good afternoon to you all. This afternoon, we have with us Dr. Femi Bolaji, who will be sharing some thoughts on mixed methods, enhancing research outcomes through integrated approaches. Dr. Bolaji is an experienced researcher and lecturer in the social sciences. and built environment. He holds a PhD in development studies from the School of Oriental and African Studies of the University of London and 2 master's degrees, one in the built environment from University College London and another in Geographical Information Systems from University of Ibadan. He also holds a BSc degree in civil engineering from Obafemi Awolowo University. Dr. Bolaji teaches research methods to university students and supervises research projects. Recently, he was an advisor to the Nigerian government on the delivery of a capital investment program for major road and bridge infrastructure. I trust we shall have a fruitful engagement this afternoon. Dr. Bolaji, it's all yours now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. and the team for putting this all together. Thank you all for attending as well. I'll start by saying that because it's knowledge sharing, it's not teaching, I may seem to be going relatively fast. That's because there's a lot to cover. And also my aim is to allow as much time as possible at the end for interaction, for you to ask questions, for you to make comments, for you to share your experiences as well in research methods. So I would also ask that if you have questions, let's wait until the very end when we will take the questions. So thank you so very much again for putting this together, the Education Collaborative. I'll start by sharing my slides now. Okay, please let me know if you can hear me, if you can see my screen. Thumbs up, please.
Yes, I can hear you and see your screen.
You can see my screen. Thank you very much. So once again, the topic is mixed methods, enhancing research outcomes through integrated approaches. That's me. My background is civil engineering, really. And about sometime towards the end of the 90s was when I ventured into the social sciences, when I did a master's degree in the geography department at the University of Ibadan. But I never did leave civil engineering. But you will know that civil engineering is a social engineering, and a lot of the development of projects is with stakeholders, is done with end users. So that necessarily means that I had opportunity to become more and more involved in the social side of things. And then, of course, I went to do research at the School of Oriental and African Studies, which further helped me to ground myself in social research. So that's me. That's my, I live in the UK. I'm very close to Africa through projects, through familial relationships. So I'm an insider, as it were, to the case study I'll be sharing at the end, which I hope will be quite engaging to us all. Bear with me. So the presentation is in 3 parts. At the beginning, I'll try and lay a foundation for mixed methods research. We're all in academia, so it isn't teaching as much as it is knowledge sharing. So if I appear to be going very quickly through the slides and you have questions, please wait until the very end. I'm just trying to make sure that we have enough time for engagement at the end. So the first part, I'll be laying the foundation for mixed methods research, or reminding ourselves how mixed methods research came into being. And then in the second part, I'll be speaking about how do you plan and conduct a mixed methods research. And then we'll have a case study. I'll say at the very beginning that the case study is going to be based on a major research at the University of London, a major and recent research, which you would be able to relate to one and all. So the foundations of mixed methods research now. What is mixed methods research? What is it all about? We know that a researcher ordinarily systematically gathers data, whether quantitative data or qualitative data, in his research. It could be done in one investigation, it could be done across multiple research studies. But what a mixed method research aims to do, or methodology aims to do, is to combine the two in a single study or across studies. So within the same study, you would have quantitative investigations, you would have qualitative investigations, and the idea is to give you a more comprehensive understanding of the research problem, which ordinarily one method or the other would not give you. It's been called a number of names. It's been called quantitative and qualitative methods, integrated or combined research, multi-methods, combined research, mixed methodology, mixed methods. That's by Creswell. Creswell is a leading light in the development of mixed methods research. It's also been called multi-strategy and hybrid research. But the name mixed methods appears to have come to stick with us in the research industry. Now, I'll give you some examples. So from the very beginning, we know exactly what it is we're talking about. So let's say you want to conduct a health behavior study. You want to examine physical exercise practices among adolescents. You want to see the frequency and the type of physical exercises they're carrying out. How would you go about this? You would, under a mixed methods approach, you first would say, serve them with a questionnaire to see the frequency and the type of exercises they're carrying out. Then next, you could have a focus group discussion, which is qualitative, and engage with them. In such a session, barriers will be down, and they would give you some more insight, which would inform the results or the findings of your investigation about the health practices in relation to physical exercise. If you simply conducted an interview, or if you simply gave them a questionnaire, there's some nuances you would not be able to capture. Likewise, if you simply only had a focus group, it's unlikely you'll be able to capture things like their height, the actual times they exercise, the type of exercises they do, as well as you would if you were to serve them with a questionnaire. Likewise, in, say, another example is an educational outcomes research. You want to assess the impact of a new teaching method on student performance. And you want to do this in a way that you don't get feedback and noise from attribution. So you're advised to conduct a mixed methods research. You will start, of course, by testing the students, carrying out, say, test scores, testing them to see what their performance is before and after the new teaching method was implemented. And then you would follow up with interviews with the students and the teachers to gain insight on the experiences of this new method. Same goes for a community health needs assessment to identify the health needs in the community, and mixed methods approach will serve you. You could start with a survey and then follow up with, say, community forums, where you try and tease out what the health needs are, which ordinarily you wouldn't be able to get from just a questionnaire. Workplace satisfaction survey is another example. And also, if you wanted to test the adoption of technology, say in a company or among entrepreneurs, you would, a mixed methods approach would serve you as well. You could start with a qualitative interview with the bosses, the leaders of the company, find out what the experiences are, how much have they spent what do they consider to be the benefits? And then, of course, you could then serve them a questionnaire as well, just to hone in and to get more granular details, which would inform the findings of your study. So let's continue. Why do we carry out mixed methods research? There are a number of reasons, but I've tried to fine-tune and narrow down to just about the 5 you can see on your screen. Triangulation. That's one of the utmost objectives of research. You want to triangulate your data sources so that you can corroborate them and to achieve convergence. If your data sources are not converging, that's an occasion for you to stop and think. And what is happening here? Is it that your research is not credible or reliable, or have you found something which you need to go back and look into? Likewise, complementarity, development. You can, in mixed methods research, you can use the result from one method to develop or inform the other method. What do I mean? When we get to the case study, you will see that I started off with a quantitative study. Some of the results, early results I got from the quantitative study informed the second stage and third stage of the research. It informed the focus group discussions which I held. It informed the interviews. It informed what I was looking for when I attended events and participated as an observant. Likewise, to expand the breadth and of your and range of your research, a mixed methods approach would serve you well. The history. So from the late 1980s right up to the early 90s, so researchers in so many places, really, researchers in the United States, researchers in the United Kingdom, researchers all over the world, really, in different disciplines as well, in evaluation, in medicine, in science, in nursing, in Canada, for instance, they all started to ask the question, how can we get better results from our research? And they were giving serious thought to ways to link or combine methods, and decided to write books, articles about their experiences. It didn't start in the 80s, though. As early as 1959, in a study by Campbell and Fisk, they had come up with psychological test results, but they needed to validate those results. And it was difficult until they went beyond the testing regime to more qualitative methods could they start to get meaningful and nuanced outcomes. So I've said the disciplines, it happened across disciplines, in medicine, in nursing, in evaluation, in different countries as well. All of these researchers started to see that the limitations of a one methodology approach to research was becoming glaring to them. The theory serves as the foundation for researchers, for what researchers expect as the outcome of their work. Now, the challenge is that there are different theoretical paradigms for quantitative and qualitative research. As a result, there's been a lot of debate whether you can actually combine these approaches without introducing bias into your findings. We know that quantitative research is deductive in nature. Qualitative research is inductive. However, when it comes to mixed methods research, the ruling theoretical framework is pragmatism. You just want to be pragmatic and do what works for you, what gets you the result, rather than stick to one approach and miss the core messages from your research. How do you plan and conduct a mixed methods research? How do you plan and conduct a mixed methods research? Research in itself entails a systematic collection of data. You analyze the data, you interpret it, you report your findings, you publish, and but at the very beginning, you need to design the research, and you have a specific intent, you have underlying assumptions, you have theoretical frameworks, methodologies you're going to follow. How would you integrate strategies? What are the strengths of the different approaches? What are the challenges you expect to have? And what are the variations to the different kinds of design that you could bring to your mixed methods research? The three main mixed methods research designs. The first is convergent design. Formerly that was called the concurrent or parallel design. And here what the researcher intends to do is to bring together the results of quantitative and qualitative data so you can compare or combine them. You can compare and combine them. You can use one to explain the other. So the research doesn't stop when you've gathered the data alone. Another mainstream method is the explanatory sequential design. It's also called the explanatory design. So here there are two distinct phases. First, you collect and analyze the quantitative data, and then you collect and analyze the qualitative data to explain or expand on your findings in the quantitative aspect of the study. And third, but not the least, is the exploratory sequential design approach, whereby you collect qualitative data at the beginning. Say you have a forum discussion or you have a focus group discussion, and that's what you use to develop a tool. For instance, say a survey instrument, say an app, or it could even be an online questionnaire, which you then use to gather your quantitative data. So the approach is reversed in that method, in the sense that you start with the qualitative and then you go on to the quantitative. It's just as I said, if you are going to have, say, a health study among adolescents, just to find out how do they exercise, you could start by having a meeting with them. You could start by having discussions with them before you serve them a questionnaire, because what you tease out of them will inform your questionnaire as well. So that's just a graphical, that's just a representation of the three mainstream approaches which I've talked about. Now, there's some things to consider when you're collecting data in a mixed method study. And first, you know, your data collection should respond to the research question and the timing of your study and the phasing, which comes first, the quantitative or the qualitative. But there's some things you need to consider at the very, very beginning. First, what's the source of your sample? Because if you're going to have a quantitative study and a qualitative study, are you applying your instruments, your research instruments, to the same sample or different samples? So if you were to gather, say adolescents, and you wanted to assess the physical exercise practices, when you meet with them in a forum discussion, are you going to serve the same group the questionnaires, or will you give them an online tool which you want them to complete? So that's something you need to be clear about at the very beginning. Then what's the nature of the sample? Are they the same or different individuals? That's similar to the first, but there's a little bit of difference. The sample size, will the sample size be the same or not? If you are to conduct, say, a multi-sited mixed methods research, it's unlikely your sample size can be the same, because you serve a questionnaire at the very beginning to, say, 100 people, And then you travel to another site to hold interviews among key informants, among people who should know about the phenomenon you're investigating. Your sample size is unlikely to be the same, but you need to be very clear about that from the very beginning. Then the phasing, which comes first? Which comes first, the quantitative or the qualitative? And also the operational questions. Those are the questions you use to operationalize your research. You need to be quite clear about them. Will there be parallel questions? Are you asking the same questions, albeit in a different way? So if you asked questions in a quantitative survey, in a survey, for instance, questionnaire, are you going to be asking the same questions again when you go and meet people and then have, say, an interview with them, whether it's a semi-structured or unstructured interview? You need to be quite clear about that from the beginning. Now, what are the research instruments that we use? Remember I said that a mixed method study is simply a combination of a quantitative approach and a qualitative approach, or the other way. The instruments we use are the same. And now to remind us about our quantitative research instruments, you know, we use surveys and questionnaires. These days, questionnaires are online. In the past, you would print out paper questionnaires and serve them, but these days many questionnaires are online. Then standardized tests are quantitative instruments as well. Observation checklists. So I remember I used to be a traffic engineer, and you would go with an observation checklist. So you would stand at a junction, and then you would start to try to see who's turning right, who's going straight ahead, who's turning left, what are the categories of the different vehicles? Are they cycles? Are they buses? Are they cars? So the same observation checklist you use at one junction, you will use at another junction. So that's a quantitative research instrument. These days, you will use, for some time now, it's a video that will do that for you. I'm talking about the early 90s when I started working. And then, of course, you don't rule out your secondary data sources. As a matter of fact, that's happened at the very beginning of your study when you're still defining the study before you actually work out your sample, work out your population, work out your selection method. There's some data you would have collected through your secondary data collection process. And then the quantitative data, the data we get from quantitative studies are survey responses, experimental data. If you carry out a social experiment, for instance, you will get quantitative data from it, in addition to qualitative data, then numerical observations, performance scores and ratings, secondary data from databases as well. And then our qualitative instruments are interviews, focus groups, observations, case studies, document analysis, just pouring through existing documents, reports, publications to try and find out information, data and information that's pertinent to your study. And the outcome of the application of your qualitative instruments will be interview transcripts. I remember we used to have to, once you've recorded your interview, you will sit with your recorder and transcribe the conversation, the dialogue you had. These days it's done in software, but it's still qualitative data. Then observation notes, focus group discussions, documents and artifacts, audio and video recordings. So you can see that a mixed method approach affords us the opportunity of a richer data sets which we can query or analyze for results and to inform the answers to the research question. Okay, data analysis. In mixed methods data research, what the researcher is really aiming to do is to integrate and analyze both the quantitative and qualitative data in ways that enhance the depth, the validity, and robustness of the conclusions of the study. If you've done qualitative research, you'll be familiar with these approaches. You have the thematic analysis with quantitative integration. I'll give you an example. So when you're doing, let's say you administer a semi-structured interview. You get an opportunity within the interview to ask questions which give you subjective opinions. At the very end, you serve a questionnaire. At the very end, you would say, do you have anything else to say? So that's an open-ended question. So that the responses to that question is going to feed into your software application when you're starting to analyze the themes. So you don't disregard your questionnaire and say, oh no, a questionnaire is a quantitative instrument. No, it affords you an opportunity to also capture textual data, which you can analyze under thematic analysis. There's content analysis with descriptive statistics. Now, why descriptive statistics? Many times, what happens is that depending on your sampling method, if you are unable to carry out randomized sampling for reason of scope and the availability of results, you're only going to be able to carry out descriptive statistics. Now, those statistics will be very useful in your content analysis when you're carrying out your qualitative data analysis. So they're fairly basic, but they're going to be useful as well. And then there's constant comparison with statistical testing, there's data transformation, there's correlation of qualitative and quantitative results. Now, validity and reliability. We know that in mixed methods, how does a researcher ensure validity and reliability in mixed methods research? We know that the types of validity in research, you have internal validity, you have external validity, you have construct validity, you have integration validity, all sorts. But it's worth remembering that within mixed methods research, our aim is to ensure accuracy, credibility, trustworthiness of the study's findings. So it involves evaluating both the quantitative and the qualitative components of your data for their strengths and integrating them in a way that enhances the overall understanding of the phenomenon you're studying. It also needs to be reliable. It needs to be reliable. Reliability means it's consistent, it's the stability and dependability of the research findings. So if someone else were to carry out your research under the same conditions, they should arrive at the same conclusions. So that's what ensures, that's what guarantees us that your process has been reliable. So key approaches to ensure validity and reliability: you keep accurate documentation. We tell students when you're going out on fieldwork, at the end of every single day, look in your journal, look in your book, read through, because you might forget. So if you need to add explanatory notes, add the explanatory notes. Make sure your documentation is valid. Of course, member checking, check. Now, when you've administered a questionnaire, for instance, it's good practice to pick out a number of the people who administered to whom you administered your questionnaire, especially if they're not anonymized, if it's not a questionnaire whereby they don't expect you to have contact with them afterwards. You have informed consent, they've given you their name, they're happy for you to get in touch with them. Of course, you could check with them to verify the accuracy of what they've put down in your questionnaire. I'll give you an example. I did a research where I was trying to capture incomes among a group of Nigerians in the UK. But my questionnaire was in pound sterling. But this fellow had his Nigerian thinking hat on. So he put down, my income is maybe 10 million pounds a year. So the only way you can know whether he meant 10 million pounds or 10 million naira is if you check with him. Otherwise, you would have to discard that response. It's not useful to you. And of course, pilot testing, you carry out a pilot among the sample before you go on to do the full survey. Then there's integration of data and triangulation. Triangulation entails using multiple data sources, methods, or theoretical perspectives to cross-check and confirm findings. That enhances the credibility and comprehensiveness of your research. It's very important. It's key. Triangulation is key. And triangulation is, so mixed methodology affords us an opportunity to triangulate because you've tried to collect information from different data sets and sources. So if there's convergence, then you know that there's credibility and completeness of your findings. Ethics. Ethics applies to whatever research you're carrying out. So I just put this slide in to remind ourselves that research must be carried out responsibly and respectfully. Responsibly and respectfully. You must obtain informed consent. There's a little bit of a difference. If I were to send you a questionnaire by email or an online questionnaire, you click on a link. The first page you would see is the consent form. So until you click or tick that you're happy to participate under the conditions which are stated, you can't go further. So you obtain informed consent. However, in your qualitative study, you're meeting the people at the first time at the hall, at the village hall. You still need to obtain their consent, or there's a gatekeeper. There's somebody, if you carry out research, say in the northern part of Nigeria, among women who don't come out, there's a gatekeeper, there's a Megiddo at the compound. You need to obtain his consent before you carry out your research or before you administer a questionnaire or you speak with the people in an interview. So that's a key aspect of ethics consideration, regardless of whether you're carrying out a quantitative study, a qualitative study, or your study is mixed. We'll move on quickly now. Then there's confidentiality, there's data integrity, minimizing harm. You must ensure that you reduce the risk of harm to your participants. And many times it's so you obviously would have had a risk assessment before your ethics application is approved. So if you're going to be interviewing people whom after you've left, you've set them up to be a target, you don't do it, or you find a different way to interview them when there's no one present who could harm them. Or the publication of your research findings. If you are to publish your report in a way that you haven't anonymized the participants who have asked to be anonymized and they are recognizable, you put them at risk of harm. So that's another important consideration in mixed methods research. Whatever research you're carrying out anyway is an important consideration. And then there must be transparency in the integration of your data. How you combine, you mustn't combine your data sources in a way that presents a false picture. The reality is that sometimes there won't be alignment, but that means you found something else. You found out that there's a difference in what you captured through your quantitative research and qualitative. It gives an opportunity to go back and reinvestigate and expand the study to find out what was responsible. You don't force your data to say what it is not saying. It's got its limitations, obviously. It can be time consuming and resource intensive. There can be methodological inconsistencies. The paradigms are different. One is deductive, one is inductive, so there can be inconsistencies. The analysis can be complicated. You would imagine you've got all this quantitative data, you've done a lot of SPSS, and then you still need to go and do a lot of NVivo again. You require skills that you require more skill than you would if you are carrying out a single type of data research. It can be difficult to achieve a balance between them. You just report what you find. You report what you find, and then there could be a challenge in justifying a mixed methods approach. It depends on who's commissioned you. If they're just after a yes or no, they may not have the time to or interest in the nuances you're aiming to capture through further testings. So in that regard, that could be a limitation. Those are references if the organizers would decide if they will share the slides with you, but you see references there and additional resources. Okay, now we go to the case study. And bear with me. I think after the case study is when we go into the questions and answers. Okay, so recently at the University of London, the School of Oriental and African Studies, I led actually a major research into migrant remittances along the UK to Nigeria remittance corridor. So what that means is the monies that migrants send home, the diaspora they're called, we know that a lot of that money is used for consumption purposes. So people pay fees, people buy food, you pay rent for your parents, you support some different causes, weddings, funerals. That's what a lot of the money is used for. But then we know that some of that money goes towards productive uses as well. And as you'll see shortly, there's been a drive to leverage some of those monies to deliver public goods. That's the justification for the study. So here's an outline for the case study, an introduction. I've given you an introduction, the objective, the design, data analysis, key findings, and the policy implications. Okay, so the aim of the study was to explore the potential of diaspora finance to support infrastructure development. Diaspora finance is a catch-all term for remittances and diaspora wealth. Also, direct and indirect remittances. So if you send money home to the village, for instance, that's a direct remittance. If you invest, if you were to buy a financial product, invest in buy shares, so that's indirect. So all of those mechanisms are termed diaspora finance. And in recent years, the international public policy community led by the World Bank, they've shown quite a lot of interest in leveraging remittances for productive uses. And the reason is they've seen that remittances are large, they're steady, and they're counter-cyclical. That means that come rain, come shine, they seem to stay the same. More than foreign direct investments, which since the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, they've been declining. So there's been a lot of, in the public policy community, there's been a lot of angling to leverage remittances for productive uses. This slide shows you the point I was making about remittances. Remittances is the blue line. You can see that it's growing. You can see it's been growing steadily from when records started in 1990. Unlike foreign direct investment, official development assistance, you can see them very widely dancing up and down, and also portfolio and equity flows. You can see them dancing. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria now, we know that the multinationals are leaving. FDI is at its lowest since about 2010, 2011. Whereas remittances, if you were to see, this is a 2020 chart. If you were to see the 2020 chart, it keeps growing. So the blue, where you see the dip was COVID in the blue line. So there's a little bit of dip, and then it picked up again afterwards. So the objective of the research was to actually examine the anecdotal evidences that migrants are actually doing more than just sending money home for consumption. That they're getting involved in productive ventures back home. The challenge was there's hardly any study. Most of the studies on remittances look into household uses of remittances. How is the money channeled? How is the money used? How is the money deployed? What are the volumes? There's hardly anything about the productive uses, especially infrastructure. We know there's infrastructure there, but there's hardly any research and anything in the literature. And that's an area where this research made a significant contribution to the literature. To operationalize the research, I asked 3 questions. How are the diaspora currently making financial transfers for infrastructure provision? What are they sending the money for? If empirical evidence suggests that they are influencing the infrastructure landscape, how are they doing it? Then what are the factors? What motivates them to send non-familial remittances? And what are the impacts that the monies are having? Some facts and figures just to back up the claims that the international public policy community has become very keen, and there's been that diaspora entrepreneurs as well who've become very keen in the monies that migrants send back home. You can all relate with that. You have people who live abroad. You've lived abroad yourself, so you can all relate with the amounts of money that is sent home. So between 2008, 2002 to 2008, that's before the global financial crisis, remittances reached a record high of 548 billion. That's a lot of money. Now, what happened was after 2001, 9/11, after 9/11, so remittances were formalized. The channels for sending them were tightened up. So that's how we became able to measure how much is being spent. But don't forget that a lot of the money is going through unrecorded sources. So any of these figures, some researchers feel, some scholars feel just double the amount, because somebody is traveling, you give him money. Somebody is, there's also mutual exchange. Somebody back home needs school fees paid here, you pay for him, he gives the money to your dad. There's a lot of that happening, which is not formalized. So take these figures with a pinch of salt. They only declined slightly during COVID. You will think that during COVID in the Western world, when economic activity ground to a halt, people would not send money home. They sent money home. That's because remittances are said to be counter-cyclical. So because they are emotive, you wouldn't say because you're not working or because you're out of contract, if you're in agreement to send money to your parents, you send it. You may send them less, which explains the little dip. You send it. That's why there was interest to bring remittances into the global financial infrastructure. In Nigeria, for instance, the 2019 record, remittances was about 5.3% of GDP. The annual budget, many times the monies that Nigerians abroad send home exceeds the annual budget in the country. So it's a lot of money we're talking about here. Now, the government, where infrastructure is concerned, the government estimates that the 3 trillion pounds will be needed over 30 years to develop to close the infrastructure gap in Nigeria. And that averages 100 billion every year. Whereas the average budget in a year is between $25 billion to $30 billion. Where's the money going to come from? That's why in 2014, thereabout, Nigeria started to make plans, and they eventually sold the diaspora bond, which is another story, to try and raise money from the diaspora. That bond, they started off with $150 million. They ended up issuing $300 million of diaspora bonds, and it was oversubscribed. But that's another story altogether. But it's stories like that that influence the decision or the interest in leveraging remittances for productive uses or the provision of public goods. So the design, the research which I carried out was a multi-sited mixed methods approach. Multi-sited means I started in the UK among the diaspora or the Nigerian migrants, and I followed the money back home to Nigeria to see what the money was being used for, to see the projects they were channeling the money into. So just some information about the approach. So first I did a quantitative study, and I obtained 150 completed questionnaires. So what I did was to map, there isn't a survey, there isn't a register of all Nigerians in the UK. The High Commission doesn't have one. So what I did was to map the associations in which they participate, the diaspora associations, the hometown associations, the old school associations, the churches they go to, the charities they participate in, the mosques where they pray. And I found 560 active associations. I disregarded those that were not active. Those that were not active, or those that were not that did not have a presence on a register, I disregarded them and found 560 associations. And I channeled my questionnaire through the associations to the people behind the associations. And I got more responses than 150, because I was interested in completed surveys. I need to know, are you sending money? I need to know your educational background. I need to know your age. I need to know the cohort in which you came to the UK. So I ended up with just about 150 questionnaires, which is about right, because after I was investigating motivation, scope, impact, and for each of those factors, we only need about 30 to 50 responses. So that was about right. Then I had contextual interviews in the UK, Nigeria. I had a group discussion with a major umbrella association of Nigerians in the UK. And then I went to a number of events, parties, political gatherings, just to observe and to meet with people and to ask questions. And then I, of course, came to Nigeria and looked at the projects to which the monies are being deployed. Now, so that's the quantitative investigation. I'm going to stop soon, so I'm going to speed through the rest of the case study. So I could only use basic descriptive statistics because my sample was not randomized. There isn't a register. There isn't a register of Nigerians, so I could only use a basic descriptive statistics, which I fed into an application to be able to tease out. I developed a profile for the Nigerian diaspora in the UK. Now, I would say that definitely my results were skewed because don't forget, I disregarded the non-formalized associations. So the people who are sending money under the table, the people who are sending money through or registered money transfer operators, I had no way of reaching them or validating the things. If you don't have an audit trail, how do I know? If you simply tell me you sent £5 and you don't have a receipt, how do I know what you're sending? Or if you're a money transfer operator and you tell me, oh, I do 2,000 every month. So that means that my results were skewed and my profile you see in a minute what my profile of Nigerians turned up to be. So that's the authenticity of research. You don't force the data. You don't force your research to say what it is not saying. You own up to either bias or things you observe in your research, which you think could influence the outcomes. So for the qualitative and for the qualitative study, I use a framework approach. I fed my data, transcripts, all source textual data into NVivo to be able to generate results. And then, so I'll show you some results. So this chart you're looking at shows you, so each dot represents somebody. So to the left, you can see the number of times he sent money home. And then underneath, you can see how much he sent home in a 12-month period. So I found out on average, people send money home once a month, which makes sense. If he spent once a month, he will send money home once a month. Also, I try to capture general remittances, everything you send in a year. Then I try to capture what you send for infrastructure provision as well, because you know infrastructure is long-term. You don't build the house in a year. So I try to get data for 5 years. How much did you send for infrastructure to build your house, to build a school, to build a hospital? How much did you send over 5 years? So that's the quantitative outcome of my research. Then I was able to, because I asked questions about age and gender. So you can see straight away that the 50 to 64s are the ones who send money home the most, followed by 35 to 49. The numbers will not tell you why. It's when you get to the interviews that you will know why. If we have the time, I'll explain. And then from the educational qualification chart, you can see what I said about because my sample were people with an audit trail. So the people working in the market, the people working underground, the people doing cleaning, the people who are undocumented, they were not reflected. That's why you're seeing the spread of the educational attainment that way. And also that's income level. So you will see that it's a spread again. You can see the men, you can see the women, you can see the proportion, and then you can see the professional occupations from the surveys and the interviews. So the key findings, I found that housing was the most prominent area of the financial flows. They sent money to housing the most. They were more interested in buying a house or building a house. Then I found that they were doing it individually. So they were individual remittances. They're also doing, they were sending money to their hometowns, to their home schools, to their old students associations collectively. That was the second area of their interest, was education. They were sending money back home to support the development of both the soft and hard infrastructure in their schools, in their old schools. Then the findings again, the motivation, I found what motivates people to send money is the age group. You remember that chart I showed you about the age group? What motivates them to send money is the age group to which they belong. Then also I found that the generation, so generation simply means where were you born? If you were born in Nigeria, then if you are the generation when you came to Nigeria, to the UK. So if you are born in Nigeria and came your first generation, if you are born in Nigeria and they brought you as a child, you are 1.5 generation. That's if you are born by parents who had emigrated, your second generation. So I found that the first generation were more likely to be involved in remittances. Likewise, the migration cohort, when you came, and the immigration climate when you came shapes whether you send money and how much you're able to send. If you came when immigration regulations were restrictive, you had a hard time trying to settle down, talk less of sending money. If you came when you could do buy to let, for instance, and it was extended to you, you had a high opportunity of being able to get on the property ladder. Those are the things that affected your socioeconomic profile and whether you're able to send money or not. There's no way I'm going to find those things out if I simply administer the survey, if I did not interview people, go to their meetings, go to their homes, go to their parties to find out what they were doing. And of course, gender, I found that men were sending money than women.
Yes.
Can I continue? Okay, gender. So what I found is, once you see the forms, people will say that you will find it's men who are sending the money most. But that's not the reality. When you speak with people, you'll find that many times the man was sending money from household income. He was simply the one who was making the arrangements. So it doesn't mean that men were sending money more than women, but it's not until you get onto the qualitative aspect of your research can you find out. But if you were stuck with the surveys, for instance, you simply say, oh, it's men that send money, women don't. And then I found that trust issues. I'll elaborate on that soon. So impact now, the remittances are contributing to the housing stock in Nigeria, the indications of transfer of skills and values and norms. So some people become builders, developers in Nigeria. I found estates founded by the diaspora members, and what you will find is they're shaping the nature, the face of construction through the transfer of skills and values and norms in their own way from the experience they'd had living in the global north. Then the contributions are making...
Sorry to interrupt, Dr.
Yes,
Bolaji. I think we have to perhaps wrap up now for questions to come through.
Okay.
We've done about almost 20 minutes more to the end of it. So if you can please wrap up.
Okay, thank you. So those are my key findings. If you get the slides, you'll be able to go through them. And then in conclusion, I found you can't simply try and find ways to make people send money. The number of factors that shape their motivation. So regardless of the desire on the part of the government, regardless of the amounts of money that migrants have, unless issues of trust, unless some structural challenges in the country, in the sending country is addressed, unless there's an alignment of interests in the sending countries and among the migrants, you're not going to be able to leverage their money. So I've had a number of publications from the research. You can see them at those links. And then, yes, so thank you. Questions and answers, comments, and your discussions, please. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much, Doc, there for that presentation. That was very good. At this point, we'll open up discussions. If you have any question you want to ask, please, you're at liberty to do so now. And I'm sure Doc will be happy to provide some responses. So please, the floor is open for questions. Thank you. All right, Doc, in the interest of time, I would like to go for it. Just to ask, okay, I think I will hold back. Kenny, please, you can go for it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for a really engaging and insightful presentation on the subject. You referred earlier to the application of mixed methods across many sectors outside of engineering development, etc., and particularly in healthcare. I'm particularly interested in the application, the wider application in the sense of, for example, the role of mixed methods in assessing or evaluating the impact of introduction of new technology, for example, or innovation, and some of the very practical challenges that practitioners in those fields deal with, and any advice you might have for such practitioners as to how mixed methods might solve or not solve those challenges. One practical one is the one of attribution of outcomes. And now you link directly between an intervention and the actual impact of that intervention, especially in healthcare when it happens over time.
Yeah, thank you. So attribution isn't going to be solved by mixed methods alone. So attribution isn't going to be solved by mixed methods alone. But if you design your approach carefully, then you reduce the likelihood of attribution affecting your results or your finding. So I think it goes to the design. I would think you probably will be better off starting with a qualitative study. So get the people in a room or get them together in a forum or in groups and have initial discussions with them. So that's what would, from the initial discussions, they're already going to be getting feelings for what they experienced before the intervention or before the application of technology. And that would inform the sort of questions you'll be asking in your quantitative, using your quantitative instrument, say questionnaire to ask. So that way you can filter out already some of what would likely color the results you get from attribution. So you simply can't, for instance, if you simply started with a quantitative study and then you said, looked at what was performance before we bought this fancy new software. Oh, 50% of the boys, 60% of the girls, they scored 80%, 90%. Afterwards, oh, they scored 100%. Then you could simply say it's because of your software or your fancy new technique of teaching. But if you discussed with them, you could find out that, oh, wait a minute, the school didn't have a bus before. I'm talking about education now, say. Or you could say, in healthcare, you could say, oh, people could not get to hospital, but the road was built. And then because the road was built, it's easier to get to hospital. So you know that when you're trying to find out why are more people coming to hospital, it's not because of the new equipment or why are more people being treated. It's not just because of the new equipment, it's because there are other things which had happened in the background, which happened to complement the intervention. So I think, to go back to what I said, I think it's the design of your research, and I think you will benefit from starting with a qualitative study before the quantitative study, if that helps.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Doug. We have Richard. Please, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. I must make the first comment that I put my question in the chat, so I was expecting it to be read, so I don't take all this time. And I see other people are also putting some questions there, so if you could pay attention to that.
Okay,
Now, my question is
Richard. 1 minute, Rita. I can't see the charts, so I will need your help to read out the questions in the chat.
I'm thinking the host could help you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, or the moderator. Thank you.
Yes, we are keeping track on that, Prof.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is a very simple one. I had a research in which I used quantitative means to try to measure the effect of micro-lending on some business outcomes. And the quantitative analysis clearly showed that the control groups, relative to the control group, the treatment group was more profitable, experienced more profits. Now, the same quantitative way, we gathered another data from their perceptions, the people's perception, the loan receivers' perception, and it said something very different. We said that, no, it wasn't the analysis quantitative again. It showed that they were not making profit. Then we did a qualitative one where we talked to them one-on-one, and they showed that they were making profit. So my quantitative is not converging with one of the qualitative, because the second qualitative was supposed to triangulate the first one to see whether their perception is the same as the reality from when we actually took figures of what they were selling, the profit, the revenue, the expenditure and stuff. So how do you handle that kind of a lack of convergence?
Okay, so first, when you're measuring, so the numbers shouldn't lie, but as Kenny pointed out in the beginning, there could be other attributing factors to the success of what you call micro-lending. So you need to step back to look closely at that. You can only do that through qualitative. I think you probably would have been better off starting with a qualitative study before your quantitative study. That will inform the design of your questionnaire. That's one. So the other one is when you're measuring behavior, the number of other things that factor that shape perception. You know, perception is not reality. So I think the operative word for you is you need to pay more attention to attribution, to those factors that could be coloring perception, because the numbers won't lie, or to those factors that could be boosting revenues from the loans that people take. So I think it's to do with the design of your study. I think if you just look at the different approaches and find one that works for you. That's my honest view.
All right.
Thank you.
Right, Doc, thanks very much. I have a question in the chat here from Fode. See, the question is, which method do you think better fits this research topic? Examining teachers, students, and school leaders' perspectives on students' completion rates and quality of education under the Free Quality Education Program in Sierra Leone, a case study in Sierra Leone, our margin. What sort of method will you recommend for such a topic for research?
Definitely a mixed method. And I think I will start, because you're measuring behavior again, I think start with forums, discussion forums, start with discussion groups, and let that inform the design of your instruments, of your questionnaires, of your interviews. That's what I think.
All right.
So
okay.
traditionally, we would start with quantitative and then go on to qualitative. But we know now that that's not necessarily the best approach, depending on the subject or the phenomenon you're studying. Let me give you an example, for instance. This will help. Say elections, for instance. If you simply were to, it's topical now. So if you look at the votes or the numbers, it's clear who's won, who hasn't won. But behind the ballots, there are so many nuances. There are prejudices, there's bias, there's preferences. So, but in an election, the starting point is the numbers, is quantitative, before you start to look at the biases. So looking at the numbers will inform the design of your qualitative study for you to be able to get a more complete picture of, oh, what has happened here? So many times the challenge has to do with the design of your research and the methodology, the choice of methodology that you adopt.
All right, thanks, Doc, for that. There's a question from Sharif briefly, and the question is, are there applications to combine and deduce conclusion from mixed analysis method?
Are there applications to combine
and deduce conclusions from mixed analysis method?
Not that I'm aware of. You still would analyze your quantitative data in the SPSSs, in those big statistical applications. And then you would analyze your qualitative data in the NVivos, in the Stata, and then you try and make meaning of the data sources that you get. That's the researcher's job.
All right. Okay, thanks. So there's a question here. What informs, that's Richard, what informs whether or not to sample from the same, no, I think that's one. What informs whether or not to sample from the same population for both methods?
It depends on your research question. It depends on the intent of your research. So in my research, for instance, my initial sample was Nigerians who live in the UK in my quantitative study. But in my qualitative study, I wanted to find out about people who are involved in diaspora mobilization. I wanted to find out from people who disburse the money. I wanted to find out from people who transfer the money. So my sample changed. My sample changed because I was following the trail of the money from homes into the hands of the money transfer operators, across borders, into Nigeria, into homes, into projects. So my sample, my population will definitely change and will influence my sample.
All right. Okay, thanks there, Doc. So there's one from Dinah. Based on the ethical aspects of research and consent, are there any exemptions regarding the signing of consent forms by respondents?
Okay. That's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. So if you are, let's say you are a reporter on the war front, for instance, and you want to have a quick interview with somebody, let's say you are in Gaza, and you want to have a quick interview with somebody who is dashing, and you're going to film him. It is doubtful he would entertain your pulling out a form, reading it out to him, and asking you to sign it. But at the very least, you will speak with him. Oh, I'm a reporter from the BBC, and we're here to just highlight or put a spotlight of what is happening in Gaza. Do you mind if I have a quick word with you? Oh, by the way, I'm going to be recording it and to be on TV. And then he'll tell you yes or no. And usually, make sure you're not the only one. Make sure there is a witness, there's somebody else there who's heard you. So in that situation, I don't think you're going to be able to pull out a form and ask him to sign before you get your interview.
All right. So
ideally, we like to see a form. Ideally, we like to see a signed form, but there will be circumstances where you would not be able to do that.
All right, Doc, thanks very much. I think I also have a question to ask, and once moderating, I have to do that. I just want to comment briefly on the question that Richard asked about the lack of consistency in the quantitative and qualitative work. I think you must also look at the level of understanding that the people had when it came to the questions that you asked for the quantitative data collection. Now, one of the ways you do that is to ensure internal consistency when it comes to your analysis. Your Chromback Alpha should be able to give you a sense of whether there is high-level internal consistency, which therefore suggests that you are measuring exactly what you want to measure, or you are asking the right questions in respect of the issues you are tackling. So I'll look at my alpha values to see if the alpha value is borderline, then that could be a reason. But I also align with my thoughts with that of Doc about the exploratory approach, which is the quali first, leading to the quanti as a way of curing the issue. Another thought on this same question is the fact that I normally like search findings. I like when the findings contradict the norm. Those things excite me because then it provides an opportunity for original contribution. I will move heaven and earth to explain it. And once it's received, you make straight away an original contribution. So I'll not be quick to rule it out when you get search findings, particularly when you've ticked all the boxes in respect of not entertaining any error. So these are my thoughts. There's a bit more, but we don't have the time now. I would like to thank Doc very much for making the time to share these nuggets with us. We are extremely grateful, and we hope when we call upon you, you will not say no. Of course, I know you cannot say no to me, so you will say yes. So very soon, we will be seeing you on this sort of interaction again. So thanks very much for this opportunity. So I now hand over to, is it Jolene? And then
Yes.
Okay, so Jolene, it's all yours. So thanks, Doc.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Dateba. Let me just put my video on. And thank you so much to Dr. Olaji for a very insightful session. And I think judging from the questions as well, we can tell it's very much needed and you are providing the right, okay, people are still joining at this time. Okay, they've come for the pictures. Okay, team. Thank you everybody once again. We're just going to, or I'm just going to call on you to please put your videos on so we can take a picture, proof of our time here today at today's session. And I'll count us down to 3 and then I take the picture and I'll be taking 3 pictures, please. Thank you. So 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Jolene. And thank you all for staying on the call till this time. Would like to hear from you with regard to the session. So there's an evaluation link in the chat box. We would like you to click on the link and fill the evaluation to let us know how the session went for you so that we could improve on the next sessions that are coming up. We already mentioned that this is 1 in a 6 series that will be coming up in the Education Collaborative. Also, there's another evaluation link in the chat box that we want to find out how your experience has been with our programs in the Education Collaborative. So we have 2 evaluation forms to fill. One is to understand how the session went for you. Was it impactful? Do you think there were some things we could improve? And then the second one is you've been engaging with us for some time now. Would like to know how your experience has been with our programs. So would plead with you to kindly click the links. They are very short evaluation forms, so it will take less than 2 minutes to fill each of them. So I'll call on Prof. Dateba to speak to us about our next session that we'll be having, and he'll share more details for us to prepare ahead of time, and then we'll share more information with you on via emails as well. So Prof. Dateba, over to you, please.
All right, thanks very much, Rita, for this again. And I want to thank all members for being able to join us this afternoon. It's been wonderful having you on the call. Our next section will be on the 19th of December. The same time period will be when we'll meet on the call. The plan is to have some interesting discussions on the PhD journey. Perhaps we can call it the frills and the thrills of the PhD journey, the sort of things to expect, the sort of expectations that comes with PhD and how you rise up to deliver on the expectations that your supervisor will have of you. What is the justification for doing a PhD? Why would you go for a PhD over a DBA? And so on and so forth. These are things that we will be sharing in our next meeting. And then also some useful advice. We've heard about quantitative approach and quantitative approach. Which of the methods would you lean more towards? Do you have to do quantitative approach research because you are solid statistically? I share an interesting view, which I'm not going to make known now. In that meeting, we'll bring all that up. So it's going to be exciting, and I'm sure you will love to hear the thoughts that will be shared in this engagement. So that's what I have to say for now. We look forward to meeting you again on the 19th of December, 2024. Back to you, Rita.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dateba. At this point, we just want to thank you all for taking the time to join the session. We greatly appreciate you. We'll do well to share the session slides with you, and then we'll share the recordings as well, and we'll share meeting notes about the session as well. So once you've registered, we have your email addresses and we'll share that. Kindly fill our evaluation form for us. Thank you very much. Bye.